Christ returned to earth. 16 centuries after his death, he walked the streets of Seville during the Inquisition, and the people recognized him immediately. He healed the sick, raised a dead child, and the crowds gathered around him with tears of joy. And then the Grand Inquisitor, the old cardinal who ruled the city, saw what was happening. He ordered Christ arrested. And that night, in a dark prison cell, he told Christ the most disturbing truth I ever wrote: that humanity doesn't want freedom, that people are terrified of choice, that they will gladly surrender their liberty for bread and certainty and someone to tell them what to do. And what makes this unbearable is that he was right. I wrote those words and I knew they were true, and it's taken me my entire life to understand why. This is the story within a story that I buried in the Brothers Karamazov. Ivan, the intellectual brother who cannot believe in God, tells it to Alyosha, his religious brother. And through Ivan's mouth I spoke a truth so dark that even now, decades after writing it, I'm not sure I fully understand what I unleashed. Because the Grand Inquisitor isn't a villain. He's not cruel. He loves humanity. And that's what makes his argument so terrifying, that the greatest act of love might be to take away human freedom, to spare people the crushing burden of having to choose. Let me tell you what I learned about freedom that made me write this chapter. Not what I learned from books, but what I learned standing before a firing squad, what I discovered in 4 years of Siberian chains, what I saw in the eyes of men who had been given freedom and couldn't bear the weight of it. They tied my hands. December 22, 1849. I was 28 years old and I had 30 seconds to live. And in those seconds I wasn't thinking about philosophy or freedom or meaning. I was thinking about bread, about warmth, about my mother's face, about how desperately I wanted just one more day of simple, mindless existence. And when they stopped the execution at the last moment, when they commuted our sentences to Siberia, I should have been grateful for freedom, for life, for choice. But what I felt was terror. Because suddenly I had to decide what to do with this borrowed life. I had to choose what it meant. And that burden, that responsibility, it was almost worse than death. In Siberia, I lived among men who had killed, stolen, destroyed their own lives through their choices. And you know what most of them wanted? Not freedom. They wanted someone to tell them what to do. They wanted structure, rules, certainty. Even in prison, especially in prison, they were most comfortable when their choices were taken away. Wake at this time. Work at this task. Eat this food. Sleep here. No decisions. No responsibility. No crushing weight of having to determine their own fate. And I watched the intellectuals, the political prisoners like myself, and we were worse. We had fought for freedom, been arrested for demanding liberty, been sent to Siberia for believing humans should be free to choose. And once we had nothing but freedom, freedom to think, to believe, to decide who we were, most of us fell apart. Because freedom without structure is just chaos. Choice without guidance is paralysis. Liberty without meaning is a prison worse than any cell. The Grand Inquisitor understands this. He's 90 years old, has spent his entire life serving the church, and he knows humanity better than Christ does. Or at least he thinks he does. When Christ appears, performing miracles, offering people direct connection to God, offering them freedom to choose their own path to salvation, the Inquisitor doesn't see liberation. He sees chaos. He sees suffering. He sees people crushed under the weight of having to decide for themselves what truth is. So he arrests Christ. And in the prison he speaks. Christ says nothing. This is crucial. Christ remains silent through the entire monologue. And the Inquisitor explains why he had to arrest him, why humanity rejected his gift of freedom 16 centuries ago, and why they would reject it again now. You wanted humans to follow you freely, the Inquisitor says. You wanted love that was chosen, not compelled. You rejected the temptations in the desert. You refused to turn stones to bread, refused to prove your divinity with miracles, refused to rule the kingdoms of the world. Because you wanted humans to come to you through faith, through choice, through freedom. But you were wrong. Because humans don't want freedom. They want bread. They want miracles. They want authority. They want someone to take away the terrible burden of having to choose. And here's what makes this so devastating. The Inquisitor isn't lying. I wrote him and I knew he was telling the truth. Not the whole truth, not the final truth, but a truth nonetheless. Because I had seen it. in Siberia, in myself, in every person who has ever faced real freedom and run from it in terror. Do you know what real freedom is? Not the freedom you talk about. Not political freedom or the right to vote or freedom of speech. Real freedom is waking up every morning and having to decide what your life means. Real freedom is knowing that every choice you make is yours, that you can't blame God or society or your parents or your circumstances. Real freedom is the crushing responsibility of being the author of your own existence. And most people can't handle it. I couldn't handle it. When I came back from Siberia, when I had my life returned to me, I should have used that freedom wisely. I should have chosen well. Instead, I gambled, threw away money I didn't have, made the same destructive choices again and again. Because making good choices is harder than making bad ones. Taking responsibility for your own life is more terrifying than blaming external forces. And freedom, real freedom, it can destroy you if you're not strong enough to bear it. The Grand Inquisitor says that Christ made a mistake in the desert. Satan offered him 3 temptations and each one was actually a gift. Turn stones to bread, give humans what they need to survive and they'll follow you. Throw yourself from the temple and let angels catch you. Give humans the miracle they crave, proof that God exists and they'll believe. Rule all the kingdoms of the world, give humans authority to submit to and they'll be happy. But Christ refused all 3. He insisted on freedom. And humanity has been suffering ever since. We corrected your mistake, the Inquisitor says. We took freedom away. We gave them bread through the church. We gave them miracles through ritual and mystery. We gave them authority to submit to. And they are happy now. Happy in a way they never were when you offered them freedom. Because humans don't want to choose. They want to be told. They don't want responsibility. They want someone else to bear it for them. And the most disturbing part? He says all of this with love. He's not a tyrant drunk on power. He's an old man who has spent his life serving humanity, who has seen their suffering, who genuinely believes that the greatest act of compassion is to take away their freedom. Because freedom hurts. Choice is agony. Responsibility crushes the spirit. And most people, given the choice between freedom and certainty, will choose certainty every time. I'm asking you now, is he right? Look at your own life. How many choices have you surrendered because making them was too hard? How many times have you wanted someone to just tell you what to do, to take away the burden of deciding? How many freedoms have you traded for comfort, for security, for the relief of not having to think? You want someone to tell you what career to pursue, what partner to choose, what meaning your life should have. You don't want freedom. You want a script, a plan. A authority to submit to that will spare you the crushing weight of authoring your own existence. The Grand Inquisitor knows this. He's built an entire system on this knowledge. The church he represents, not the real church but the corrupted version he's created, it offers people everything they actually want. Bread through charity. Miracle through ceremony. Authority through hierarchy. And in exchange for these gifts, all they have to give up is their freedom. Their responsibility. Their terrible burden of choice. And they give it up gladly. They line up to surrender their liberty. They beg to be told what to think, what to believe, what to do. Because freedom is heavy. Choice is painful. And most people would rather be slaves who are cared for than free beings who must bear the weight of their own existence. Ivan tells this story to Alyosha, his religious brother, as an attack on faith. He's saying, your God offered freedom and humanity rejected it. So what does that say about God's wisdom? What does that say about humanity's nature? And he thinks he's proven that either God doesn't exist or God made a terrible mistake in creating humans with free will. But Alyosha, simple Alyosha who isn't as smart as Ivan but who understands something deeper, he responds not with arguments but with action. He kisses Ivan. Just like Christ, at the end of the Grand Inquisitor's monologue, says nothing but kisses the old cardinal. Because there's an answer to the Inquisitor that can't be spoken in words. And here's what I was trying to say, what took me years to understand about my own story. The Grand Inquisitor is right about what humans want, but he's wrong about what humans need. He's right that people flee from freedom, but he's wrong that this means freedom should be taken away. He's right that choice is crushing, but he's wrong that the solution is to eliminate choice. Because here's what I learned in Siberia, What I discovered through years of watching men struggle with freedom and responsibility, humans don't just want bread and miracles and authority. They also want meaning. And meaning can only come through freedom. You can't have a meaningful life if all your choices are made for you. You can't have genuine love if you're compelled to love. You can't have real faith if you're forced to believe. The Grand Inquisitor has created a humanity that's comfortable but dead, fed but meaningless, secure but soulless. He's taken away suffering, but he's also taken away everything that makes life worth living. Because the same freedom that allows humans to choose evil also allows them to choose good. The same choice that enables suffering also enables love. The same responsibility that crushes some people elevates others to greatness. And Christ knows this. That's why he stays silent during the Inquisitor's speech. Not because he can't answer, but because the answer can't be put into words. The answer is his kiss. The answer is love freely given, not compelled. The answer is the presence of someone who respects your freedom enough to let you reject him. Who loves you enough to let you choose. I met a man in prison named Petrov. He was serving life for murder, had killed in cold blood, had no hope of release. And every day he had to decide what kind of man he would be. In chains, with no freedom of movement, with his entire life determined by guards and rules and routine, he still had the one freedom no one could take from him. The freedom to choose his attitude. The freedom to decide whether he would let bitterness consume him or whether he would maintain some spark of humanity. And I watched him struggle with this freedom daily. Watched him sometimes choose bitterness, sometimes choose kindness. Watched him wrestle with the terrible burden of being responsible for his own soul even when everything else had been taken from him. And you know what? He was more alive than the guards who had every external freedom but had surrendered their internal freedom to routine and authority and the comfort of not having to think. The Grand Inquisitor would have given Petrov certainty. Would have told him exactly who he was and what he should feel and how he should think. Would have taken away the burden of choice. And Petrov might have been more comfortable. But he would have been less human. This is the paradox at the heart of human existence. We hate freedom. We run from it. We trade it for comfort and security at every opportunity. But we also need freedom. Without it, we're just sophisticated animals, running programs, following scripts, living lives that have no meaning because they involve no choice. And the question I wrestled with through the Brothers Karamazov, the question I'm still wrestling with now, is this: given that humans both hate freedom and need it, what should we do? Should we, like the Grand Inquisitor, lovingly take freedom away to spare people suffering? Or should we, like Christ, offer freedom knowing most people will reject it, knowing it will cause immense pain, because without freedom there's no possibility of genuine meaning? I wrote the Grand Inquisitor's speech as powerfully as I could. I gave him every argument I could think of. I made him loving and wise and genuinely concerned for humanity, because I wanted to take his position seriously. I wanted to confront the real possibility that he might be right, that freedom might be a curse rather than a blessing. But then I had Christ kiss him. And in that kiss is everything I learned in Siberia, everything I discovered about what it means to be human. The kiss says, I know freedom is terrible. I know it crushes people. I know most people will use their freedom to destroy themselves. But I offer it anyway. Because a life without freedom isn't worth living. Because love that isn't freely chosen isn't real love. Because humans need meaning more than they need comfort, even if they don't know it, even if they beg you to take the meaning away and give them bread instead. You're living in the world the Grand Inquisitor predicted. Look around. People are surrendering freedom everywhere. Not to the church anymore, but to algorithms that tell them what to think. To experts who tell them how to live. To systems that promise to take away the burden of choice in exchange for comfort and security. And they're doing it gladly. Begging for it. Building entire ideologies around the idea that freedom is too dangerous, that people can't be trusted with choice, that wise authorities should make decisions for the masses. And maybe they're right. Maybe most people can't handle freedom. Maybe the burden of choice is too heavy. Maybe humanity would be happier if we just surrendered to benevolent authorities who would make our decisions for us, feed us, show us miracles, tell us what to think. But I'm telling you, from the perspective of someone who has lived through the attempt to take away freedom, who has seen what happens when humans are reduced to mere recipients of care rather than authors of their own existence, it's not worth it. Comfortable slavery is still slavery. And humans need freedom the way they need air. They might not want it. They might hate it. They might use it to destroy themselves. But without it, they're not fully human. The Grand Inquisitor's final argument is this: you thought too highly of humanity. You expected them to bear the burden of freedom, and they can't. We love them enough to carry that burden for them. And Christ's answer is silence, is a kiss, is the refusal to take away freedom even when freedom causes suffering. Because respect for human dignity requires allowing humans to fail, requires letting them make terrible choices, requires permitting them to reject even God himself. This is what I learned from writing The Grand Inquisitor, that freedom isn't about happiness. It's about meaning. And meaning always involves suffering. The choice to love means risking rejection. The choice to believe means risking doubt. The choice to create means risking failure. Freedom is the permission to fail. And most people would rather have guaranteed mediocrity than the freedom to pursue greatness at the risk of achieving nothing. But here's the thing: the people who surrender their freedom, who let the Grand Inquisitor make their choices for them, who accept bread and miracles and authority in exchange for their liberty, they're the ones who end up most miserable. Not immediately. At first they're relieved, grateful, happy to have the burden lifted. But eventually they realize that a life where nothing is their choice is a life that means nothing. And that realization, when it comes, is more terrible than any suffering freedom could have caused. So what do you do with this? With the knowledge that you hate freedom but need it? With the recognition that you want someone to tell you what to do but will despise yourself if you submit? With the understanding that choice is crushing but necessary? You bear it. You accept that being human means struggling with freedom, means making choices you're not sure about, means taking responsibility for your own existence even though it's terrifying, means refusing the comforting lies that promise to take away your burden if you'll just surrender your liberty. The Grand Inquisitor offers comfort. Christ offers freedom. And most people choose comfort. I chose comfort many times. Surrendered my freedom to addiction, to passion, to the easy path. And every time I did, I became less human, less myself, more like a character in someone else's story than the author of my own. But the times I chose freedom, chose to take responsibility, to make hard choices, to bear the weight of authoring my own existence, those were the times I was most alive, most human, most myself. Even when the choices led to suffering. Especially when they led to suffering. Because suffering chosen is different from suffering imposed. Pain accepted is different from pain inflicted. And a life built through your own choices, even terrible choices, means more than a life scripted by someone else, even if their script is perfect. So here's my answer to the Grand Inquisitor, the answer I couldn't put into words until now. Yes, humans reject freedom. Yes, they flee from choice. Yes, they beg to be told what to do. But giving them what they want would be the greatest cruelty. Because humans need freedom to be human. They need choice to have meaning. They need responsibility to have dignity. And taking that away, even out of love, even to spare them suffering, would be to reduce them to something less than human. Christ kissed the Grand Inquisitor. Didn't argue with him. Didn't try to prove him wrong with logic. Just kissed him and walked away. And the Inquisitor, after a moment, opened the door and let him go. Because even the Inquisitor, who had devoted his life to taking away human freedom, couldn't bring himself to take away Christ's freedom to leave. And that kiss, that moment of grace, that's the answer to everything. Not arguments about whether humans want freedom or can handle it, but the simple gift of respecting someone's choice even when they use it badly. Of loving them enough to let them be free even when freedom destroys them. Of trusting that meaning matters more than comfort, that dignity matters more than happiness, that being human means struggling with terrible choices rather than living as a comfortable slave. You have that choice now. Every day. To surrender your freedom or bear its weight. To let someone else author your existence or to write your own story. To choose comfort or meaning. And I'm telling you, choose meaning. Choose freedom. Choose the crushing responsibility of being fully human. Because anything less, no matter how comfortable, is death.